Okay, if I could call the Governance and Operations Committee meeting of May 10th to order. It's, I believe it's about 3:35. First on the agenda today, we have a delegation from Grant Thornton. Welcome to, pleased to welcome Don Catalano and Ashley Ruggiero to provide the City of Trail with an overview of the 2020 audited financial statements and to invite council members to ask any questions they may have of either Don or Ashley with respect to their presentation. So without further ado, Don or Ashley, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Well, thanks very much. Sorry for the technical COVID difficulties. This is as part of this is Ashley's job. I asked her if I could sit in on the meeting just because I'm retiring at the end of the year, and I wanted to let council know that and let them know how much I appreciated being the auditor for the last probably 38 years or so, pretty much my whole public practice life. Been proud to be your auditor, and I'm leaving knowing that you're in good hands. So thank you very much, everybody. Ashley, take it away.
Well, thank you, Don, on behalf of all of council for working with us and never providing us any real bad news and kept us up to date on our finances. And we really appreciate it. On behalf of council, we want to wish you a happy and long retirement. So spend those millions you've made over the years.
Thank you.
Unaudited. Okay, Ashley.
I'll keep going with the good news. It appears that the city had a good year. So we'll just go through the statements that I believe you all have in front of you. I'll go through our report and then the numbers, and then there's also the report to council. So I'll start with the independent auditor's report, which is 4 pages in on the financial statements. So this is our Grant Thornton independent auditor's report. This is the only piece of the financials that are actually ours. The rest are prepared by management. So in our opinion paragraph, it states that we have audited the consolidated financial statements of the Corporation of the City of Trail, which comprise the statement of financial position as at December 31st, 2020, the statement of operations, and the changes in net debt, cash flows, and schedules 1 through 6. And in our opinion, these financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the city as at December 31st, 2020. So basically that's the gold star. That's what you're looking for. It's an unqualified opinion with no reservations. The basis for opinion paragraph just states that we conducted our audit in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards. And there's more information about our responsibilities on the second page, but I won't bore you with those details. But we do believe that the audit evidence we have obtained is sufficient and appropriate to provide our opinion. The other matter paragraph is the third paragraph, and it states that the exhibits included in the supplemental information are presented for purposes of additional analysis and are not required as part of the financial statements. And so they are not under the same audit procedures applied for the audit of the financial statements, and therefore we do not express an opinion on that extra information in the back. The last 2 paragraphs, the last one is our audit responsibilities, as I said, and the middle one is the responsibilities of management and those charged with governance. So after the audit report is the first numbers or page with numbers on it. It's the consolidated statement of financial position. So I'll just go through some of the highlights that happened in the year based on the comparative to 2019. So the first item is cash, healthy cash balance of 18 million. That actually increased 4.2 million from the prior year. So there's a couple things that I noted. It relates to lower spending due to COVID, the COVID funding grant of the 2.1 million from the government, and then also decrease in capital activities. The accounts receivable is the next item at 1.3 million. So this is down about 533,000. This is mainly due to greater collections of taxes compared to the prior year, and then just various other timing differences. So total assets is 21 million, up about basically up the amount the cash increased. The next section is liabilities. So AP, accounts payable, of about 3.4 million is up about 130,000 from the prior year. And this is just again due to timing of when payments are made and when bills come in. The other liabilities item is 16.5 million, and this is made up of prepaid utilities and taxes, and then deferred grant revenue. And the increase of about 213,000 is just due to a grant received but not spent at the end of the year. So total liabilities of 22.2 million gives the city a net debt of 1.4 million, but this is a significant decrease, and you're looking to decrease that, and you have this year, so it's down to 1.4 million from the 5.7 in the prior year. So definitely moving in the right direction on that. And then the last section is the non-financial assets, the largest balance being the tangible capital assets of 104, almost 105 million. This actually decreased in the year, although there was 3.7 million of additions, and there was various projects going on that were about the 300,000 mark, but nothing jumps out as significant. And then it was offset by $4 million of amortization. So the total accumulated surplus for the city is 103, almost 104 million at the end of the year. And we'll look at note 10 to show how that is broken down. I'll just pause. I've been talking a lot. I'll pause and ask if there's any questions at this time.
Any questions of council members? Not hearing any. Go ahead, Ashley.
Great, so we'll go on to the next page, page 5, the consolidated statement of operations. So this just adds the budget column in the middle with the 2020 and the 2019 comparative. So taxation revenue is the largest revenue of about 16 million, and it's right in line with budget. The grants of about 3.3 million is up about 1.9 from budget, and this is primarily due to the COVID-19 restart grant. Sales of services is down down compared to budget, by about 605,000, and most of this is just due to COVID closures. And you'll see in the other sections that the expenses are also decreased. And then other revenue of about 1.8 million is actually up about 704,000 from budget. And this is due to various items, but building permits, franchise fees, and equipment earnings that exceeded the budget. So total revenue, 25 million. Onto expenses. So here it's showing them by function. So we'll just kind of compare to budget, and then there's more details of how the expenses are broken down in notes 23 and 21. But general government of about 3.1 is just slightly under budget. Protective services of about 2.5 million is again just slightly under budget. The ones that kind of stick out is facilities, parks and rec, down 4.8. The budget was 5. Again, that's mostly due to COVID, and same with the festivals and airport are more significantly down compared to the budget due to COVID related things. So annual surplus, again, really good year. I know the COVID funding helped that, but so did cutting spending. So the annual surplus of 3.6 million, up 1.4 from the prior year. So if the next couple of pages just kind of show the ins and outs of the changes that we just talked about. So there's the statement of change in net debt, then the statement of cash flow, and it just goes through those differences and just shows a little bit more detail. If you go to page 13, note 10, there's a slight change that Reno and I caught just right at the tail end. The equity and tangible capital assets is right all throughout the statements. There's just one number change that we've already made, and it'll be made in the ones that are posted. The equity and tangible capital assets should be 88,392,386. So it's a $256,000 difference, and the remaining comes in the revenue fund. So again, looking at this, there's quite almost $2 million in stat reserves, the $2 million in capital funds. That's where the COVID funding is sitting. So there's $1,083,000 left over from the 2.1 million. So that's sitting in as part of the capital funds, and it's also showing in Exhibit 12 a further breakdown of how that was spent for the year. And that's a required statement that we had to put in the statements for the province. And so yeah, that's the only new schedule in the statements is the very last page, page 38, Exhibit 12, just shows the COVID restart grant and how it was utilized this year.
Any questions of Ashley thus far, so far? At this point, I mean? Okay. Proceed, Ashley.
Okay. So the report that has the people on the front page, we'll go through that one next. So this is just kind of, it'll summarize some of the things we did in the audit and provide any feedback that we have. So the purpose of the report is just to engage in open dialogue with you regarding the audit of this financial statement. Just wanted to note that the information in this document is solely for information and use for council and management, and it's not intended to be distributed anywhere else. So the status of our audit, assuming today that we have approval of the financial statements and we'll have the receipt of the signed management representation letter, we'll be able to undraft our report to put our signature on it and release the financial statements. Our approach focuses on risk areas, and we'll go through the main risks on the next page and then highlight any comments that we found. So I'm on to page 2 now. This big table, all I'll say about it, obviously COVID-19 had impacts on the city, but we discussed anything with management, discussed any impacts that we thought were significant. There is a transparent disclosure that's in the notes, basically just saying that there's various uncertainties, but we don't feel like there's any impact on the city's statements going forward. And there were no adjustments made because of COVID other than the COVID grant that was received. On to page 3, we've already, the first line there, this area, the significant transaction. We've talked at length now about this COVID funding, but it's new, so it's in the report just as information. So for significant risk, these are where we not only focus, but our primary focus on. So there's fraud risk from management override or segregation of duties. There's completeness of employee compensation, tangible capital asset testing, and conditional grants. And through this table, it kind of goes through what some of the procedures we perform are, but at the end of the day, our audit procedures did not uncover any significant findings to report. Page 4, again, this would show any adjustments that we proposed that were recorded, or any adjustments that we proposed that management chose not to post. However, we don't have anything this year. We had no adjustments and no unrecorded adjustments. Page 5, other reportable matters. So internal control. So during the audit, we obtained an understanding of internal control over financial reporting, but just to the extent necessary to plan our audit and the extent of work we do, but we don't express an opinion on the effectiveness of internal controls. However, if we become aware of a deficiency, we are required by our auditing standards to report anything like that to council. But again, our report did not, our audit results did not bring forward any reportable observations. Next heading is independent. So we just want to confirm our independence. Nothing came up during the audit that we felt we needed to bring to council. And just want to take this time to really thank Reno and his team. Last year, this audit snuck in before COVID shut everything down and we were able to do it on site. And this year, obviously, well, we could have come in, but I feel it went well being remote. And I think there was probably more pressure on the finance team, but it was great on both ends. And I think that the audits went really well. So thank you again, Reno, and pass that on to your team. The last few pages, so there's a list of technical updates. So for accounting, there's a whole bunch of new standards or tweaking standards that are going to be coming into effect. Most of them have been supposed to be coming in, but they've been pushed off because of COVID. But none of them are going to be coming in for 2022. And if there's anything that, they're going to be coming mostly in 2022, 2023. And Reno and I have a meeting for the summer to discuss other things. And if there's anything that we need to discuss with accounting changes, we'll talk about that in the summer. And the assurance for auditing standards, there's nothing new coming. So Appendix A, I won't go through it. It's there for information. It talks a lot about our audit process and how we perform things based on materiality. It's there for information. And then Appendix B goes into a lot of detail about what the new standards that are coming into effect. It gives a lot more detail. So but I'm not going to bore you with the details. I understand you have a large agenda to get through, so. So that's.
I would have bored him. I could have made it a lot longer and drawn out, so good job.
Any questions of Ashley right now? Gone pretty smooth, Ashley. It wasn't like this with Dawn.
Not here.
So if there are no comments, I assume that concludes your report. Back
Yes,
to
it does.
council, Ashley.
It does, yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much once again. And we'll be dealing with the receipt of the report later on, the last item on the agenda on the GLC later on this afternoon. So once again, thank you, Ashley. Thank you, Dawn. And once again, oh, sorry, Lisa, go ahead.
I think we need to deal with this right now. The SOFI report is on the last page. So the recommendation is, which I'm willing to move, is to accept and approve the City of Trails 2020 financial statements as presented. The city staff be directed to bring forth the City of Trails 2020 annual report at a future meeting of council and prior to June 30th for public presentation, as well as review and approval by council.
Second, Robert.
Any discussion? Not hearing any. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Thanks again, Ashley and Dawn.
Thank you.
Okay, next item on the agenda is delegation from BC Housing on supportive housing and shelter services, and welcome Matthew, Dana, and Nanette. And we'll give you a minute to log in or turn your videos on. Welcome, Nanette, Matthew.
Oh,
Dana.
thank you.
So who wants to take the lead from BC Housing?
So I can start, and I have a presentation I'll put on and share with you that myself, Nanette, and Matthew will go through. And we just wanted to have this as we had our discussion in regarding opportunities in trail, to come back and just sort of be more detailed in the description of what supportive housing is and shelter is, and be available to answer any questions that you might have about these two specific programs that we are working on. Any questions before I start sharing the presentation, or?
I don't know. The floor is yours. Go for it, Dana.
Thank you. And just give me a moment. This is always new to me, this sharing of screens.
There it is.
Can you see that?
Yep.
Thank you. Excellent. Oops, no, not that one. That's not what I want. Apologies. Okay, so you can see that. Okay, everyone can see that.
Yep.
Excellent. And I want to forgive me for my there. All right, I'm ready. So I'll just kick it off. A bit of introductions. I'm Dana Locke. I'm the Director for Regional Development at BC Housing, responsible for the interior region. Nanette Drobot, who's also on the call, is the Regional Director responsible for operations in the, for again, the same region for the interior. And Matthew Cameron, and I always get Matthew's position confused, but is the supportive housing advisor. And I think there's a manager title in there somewhere, and is responsible, one of a few positions we have that's responsible for ongoing supportive housing and shelters as they operate and working through the agreements with the staff. And as they come on, I'll let them provide more details about their role, because I have not done them justice in that discussion. So I just wanted to acknowledge that BC Housing works on the traditional territories of many of our First Nations communities across the province. And this discussion is precipitated by the fact that we do have a homeless crisis in many communities across BC across British Columbia as a whole. And this includes the Kootenays and, of course, as you know, some areas of trail has been impacted recently or historically by this as well. With the COVID-19 pandemic, it's actually become more, we've seen a more prevalence to seeing the visible homeless, those that were not visible in the past, couch surfing, staying with friends from, month to month, due to COVID and social isolation, have actually had nowhere to go. And that's caused some more visibility of more homelessness or people struggling with affordability. And we're seeing them wanting to get people off the streets because also of COVID and the transmission of COVID through vulnerable populations. So we've been working even harder to try to get more shelters, more spaces. Some communities we've rented motel rooms to have people have isolation spaces to keep the spread of COVID down. But it has sort of seen more of that uptick in us seeing the homeless population, especially some that were hidden previously. And so we are always looking for opportunities to work with municipalities to explore housing solutions to help people at risk of homelessness across the region. And this is a great opportunity for us to discuss what those options we have at our disposal and the programs we have in both our shelter funding and our supportive housing funding as well. So we wanted to have today to respond, just to share information with you and respond to any questions that you might have or any other things that you would like to discuss about these programs.
Yeah.
And you can see my next slide, I hope. I'm just getting used to these PowerPoints. Anyways, so here, just before we get into the supportive housing, I just want to really talk a little bit about the housing continuum in its entirety. So we have sort of on our far left of this continuum and under our Building BC programs, you see us addressing homelessness in both shelters and supportive housing with services and even into the social housing, which we have through our community housing fund. That's affordable housing for seniors and families, which we've done a few projects in Trail 1, finishing up with the Lower Kootenay, Lower Columbia Society, and also the Trail Seniors Project we're currently working with are under those programs. Then we have our rental assistance programs. If you're aware of those, our SAFER and rent assistance are for they're tenant-based programs. So SAFER is a subsidy for seniors in the private market. And so if they're paying a market rent where they can apply for some additional help from us directly to make their rents more affordable. And we call those tenant-based subsidy. Landlords might not even know that senior is getting that. That's private. That is an application they make. And we have a rental assistance program for families. And I believe that's for working families that make $40,000 or less with children. And the same thing, if they're struggling with their rent, paying more than 30% of income, they can apply to us for a direct subsidy if they're in the private market. So we're trying to address that as well. And then we also have our housing hub, which addresses affordable rental and just creating affordable homeownership for that middle income. So it's about a supply program. So we are actually engaged, BC Housing is, from end to end right now in this continuum. And in the recent budget, the financing announcement of $2 billion was for that housing hub aspect. So that they can provide financing to developers and nonprofits to build that middle income, sort of low in a market type of product. The left-hand side is the Building BC program, which is a 10-year program that was announced 3 years ago. So just to give you an opportunity, although we're just going to talk about supportive and shelter, that we are having funding in all these different areas as well. And I could say, if you have questions, I don't know if you can wait for the end or you can ask as soon as we're in the slide. Feel free to chime in if you have any questions.
Thank you, Dina. Okay.
And I'm going to turn it over to Nanette now for this next slide.
Everybody. So as Dana mentioned, my name is Nanette Drobot and I'm the Regional Director for Operations for the Interior Region. So all that means is that everything that Dana develops, then me and my team take it on and across the housing spectrum. So we really work collaboratively with our nonprofits to maintain the housing and to make sure that people are properly supported in their housing, whatever that looks like. In probably 4 years ago, BC Housing decided that we needed to really increase our specialization, I'll call it, around our homelessness services. And so shelters, supportive housing, our outreach programs. And so a new position was created, which is Matthew's position. It's a supportive housing advisor position. And that doesn't tell you kind of his full scope of what he does. So Matt's really responsible for the shelters in the region that he's designated, the supportive housing. We also have a significant number of temporary shelters in our region. And now, of course, our COVID response. So Matt is really leading that work in the interior region. So, and he can talk more about sort of some of the details about supportive housing when we get there. This slide is really, it really is the foundation for all the work that we do. Really, our work is around collaboration, and our municipal partners are a really key partner for us in terms of moving ahead on some of these projects, especially when some of the projects are divisive in a community. For sure, we've seen that. I'm sure you have too in various municipalities where we have support or we don't. But to serve the vulnerable population, it needs the whole cohort of people to support that. So whether it's the City of Trail, Interior Health, community and local businesses we really work with, as well as our nonprofit providers who are actually providing the supports on the ground to make sure that this vulnerable population is adequately supported. Next slide, please. And so we know that homelessness is on the rise across the region. It's on the rise across the province and of course throughout Canada. And you know, this is an important slide just because there is no single way to homelessness. Homelessness is a really complex issue, and we've seen that complexity be exacerbated through COVID-19. We see more people who maybe had access to some couch in someone's house now no longer has that. With the increase in rents, people are being pushed out of the rental market. And we know that homelessness is very fluid. People cycle in and out of homelessness daily. And so it makes the solutions that much more tricky. And so this is just, again, a sort of a way to just underscore the complexity. I think a lot of people look at addictions and mental health as being one of the key impacts on homelessness, and that is true, but not every single homeless person has an addictions issue or a mental health issue. It could be a failed relationship, it could be a lost job, it could be an injury that resulted in not being able to work. It comes in all shapes and sizes. And so in order to develop solutions, we need that widespread approach to dealing with homelessness. Next slide, please. And so I'm not sure how much you've heard of Housing First. I think this graphic really really depicts it quite well, where you see someone unsheltered, the arrow goes straight to the bed, and then the arrow and you get some food security there, and then the arrow goes down to actually having a relationship and getting some supports brought in. So it's really the idea that people don't need to pass a test or to not have a substance use issue or to have all their mental health dealt with before they can get a place. It means that they get a place, and then we get some, as I say, food security, basic stability, and then we can move on working with individuals at where they're at. So our supportive housing is really based on this philosophy. It really underscores the need to try and meet people where they're at. And we find that is when you can provide housing to someone, that creates that first level of stability, and then you can start working with them on their journey to wellness and to recovery, whatever that might be for them. Next slide, please. And this is Matthew's turn.
Go ahead, Matthew.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, I wasn't expecting to jump in here so quick, but yeah, so supportive housing, it's essentially, it's an apartment or a studio home. The supportive housing that we have built all around the interior and all around the province, as you can see in the photos here, it's generally a bachelor suite. So it'll have a bed and a nightstand dresser, a small kitchenette with a cooktop and a microwave, and a place to put your dishes, storage for clothing, a small table, a dining table, and a self-contained washroom. Next slide.
So, Matthew, could I just ask you one question?
Go ahead, Cheryl.
Back in that previous slide that showed us the little studio, there's no refrigeration?
Oh, my apologies. Yes, there is. The pictures are very tiny, but there is a small
Okay, yeah.
bar size small bar fridge there. Some of our, depending on the building, we do have buildings that have full size fridge, and some have the smaller ones. It just depends on the site.
Typically, the interior ones we've been doing full size. These are pictures of a temporary one that was built in Vancouver, but very similar. But we have been changing it over to full size fridges.
This
Okay.
one too, you can see this one is an accessible unit because it has the shower for a wheelchair access.
Yeah.
All right. So the differences between shelters and supportive housing. Sometimes we take for granted, I think, in our business that this is obvious, but we are often reminded that it's not obvious. So shelters are generally a first come, first service. People will have to line up for them and get admitted to a bed if possible. Generally, they're in a shared communal space. And it's worth noting just how COVID has changed that for us and shelters in the region and across the province. Most of our shelters we found have had to reduce their capacity by up to 50% in general, just to accommodate for personal distancing guidelines from health, which has resulted in some of the response efforts that Dana mentioned earlier about renting motels and other sites to accommodate. Shelters generally have 3 meals served per day. There's no cost to stay at a shelter, and they will generally have some sort of outreach worker or case manager who will work with you to come up with a housing plan or other supports to connect to you off-site. Supportive housing, on the other hand, there's usually a waiting list you have to be apply to. Then there's an assessment process that has been standardized throughout the province that is administered to basically see what the level of need is for an individual. It is a self-contained studio apartment, as you saw in the photos, the kitchenette, as you saw. We also provide at least 1 hot meal a day, generally a dinner, and then also a continental breakfast. And some operators, depending on the size, some of the larger ones are able to do a little bit more than that if they have other food services integrated into their organizations already. In a supportive housing, you will sign a tenancy agreement or a program agreement, and you will pay rent for the unit. It is exactly like the apartment that I am standing in talking to you today, except they have the support services on site, which are staff generally who are there 24/7, and that is because supportive housing is really meant for folks who are generally unable to maintain a tenancy without some level of staff support to them. So next slide.
Matthew, can you talk a little bit about the assessment process for applications?
Yeah, I sure can. This assessment process, it is called the Vulnerability Assessment Tool, or VAT. It's an acronym. We love our acronyms here at BC Housing. So VAT, the VAT is a interview process. We train, when supportive housing comes to a community, essentially BC Housing will come in and train the local social service providers, stakeholders, anybody who may have clients that they are looking to house in this type of housing. We'll train them to administer the tool. And it's just an interview, a scripted standard interview with a scoring matrix that accompanies it. And at the end of it all, it kind of produces a determination that essentially establishes a vulnerability for an individual. What that allows us to do is generally there's more people needing the housing than the units we have often. And so it allows us to go through applicants and build a body in a building of tenancies that won't overwhelm the building or complementary to each other in the building, that are manageable for the operator, and that benefit the tenants themselves. Is that helpful?
Yeah, thank you.
I have a question does anybody have a question of Matthew before I ask it? Okay, Matthew, more for the general public, because just so that our residents have an understanding of what supportive housing is and what it's intended to do. I mean, the most obvious problem that we are experiencing in our community right now are people living in alleys, people living in bridges and under tents. Would it be safe to say that the supportive housing initiative will not address those issues, that those people who are drug addicted, choosing to live in back alleys and under bridges, are not the people that would qualify or would desire to move into a supportive housing complex? Is that a fair statement?
No, if I understand you. So supportive housing is for individuals. It's a choice. Nobody's forced to move into housing. If somebody wants to live out of doors, that's their choice. But if somebody is homeless living out of doors because they can't maintain a tenancy because of mental health challenges or addictions challenges, or a combination of those two, or any other physical or mental challenges, supportive housing is for that type of individual.
Okay, interesting. Any other questions?
Chair Santori, if I could just ask one question, because we are in our regular council meeting dealing with a rezoning application, I'm just wondering if one of the three BC Housing representatives could speak very briefly around the difference between supportive housing and a group home, if any.
Sure, I can do that. So supportive housing, as Matthew said, is for those living homeless or near homelessness. The group home, and I'm aware of the group home that's being rezoned, a group home in that case is a licensed facility that is caring for people with developmental and physical disabilities that are under the care of Community Living BC. And so there is actually a care service that's more, I don't want to say residential care, but similar to what you'd see where it is a requirement to be a licensed facility due to the care levels and the requirements of those individuals. So again, it's a different target. It isn't to say that supportive housing for people that might have some developmental disabilities but don't have the significant physical disabilities that group home have would also be eligible for supportive housing if they needed that care level of what the supportive housing is. So does that help with that descriptor?
Yes,
Yeah.
it does. Thank you for that clarification.
Councillor Santori, can I just ask a question?
Yep, go ahead.
So when I look at the differential of a shelter versus supportive housing and it says pay rent for apartment, when I look at our high-risk vulnerable population within our city who I think could very much benefit from supportive housing, I think, how do they pay for this? I mean, I'm assuming there should be some kind of government flow through to just allow them to survive at this point, but can you explain how that would work?
I think the question's for Matthew.
Sure. Yeah. Almost most individuals who live in supportive housing are on some sort of assistance, some level of social assistance, even if it's just a basic housing. $375 a month is sometimes what it is, and upwards from there.
But this is where I get somewhat confused, and no disrespect to those with addictions. Those that are addicted to drugs are not going to have $375 at the end of the month to pay for rent. That's a reality. It's, I mean,
sorry, Sandy, I don't mean to interrupt you, but generally the rent is sent directly from the ministry directly to the operator. It doesn't actually go through the tenant.
Okay.
So they wouldn't receive that money unless they were housed.
And that, just so you know, Councillor Santori, that happens for almost all our tenants that are receiving income assistance, families, singles, or anyone else. We tend to get a direct deposit from the social services directly to us to deposit, and the nonprofits do as well. So it's not just supportive housing where that happens. It's almost all of our housing. When we set them up in the building, they sign a form, and their shelter allowance is directly funded to the operator and the housing agent. So that is sort of a standard.
Okay, thank you.
And the other thing I think for Matt is sometimes our homeless population are not getting income assistance. They have no address and they can't receive it, and that's part of their continuation of being homeless. And one of the things when they're housed is that our support workers help them to apply, get their ID if they've lost their ID. Some people don't have any ID, so they help them to get onto that system. So if they had to go a month without paying, well, we got them set up. That would be fine as well.
Thank you. Carol?
I could just add to that. So paying rent for apartment, does any part of that rent go towards their food? Like they're getting one hot meal a day, sometimes a continental breakfast. Who pays for that?
We fund that. We don't charge them for that side of it. They just pay the rental portion for the housing.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I can only see a few.
I have a question.
Okay,
Sandy.
I can't see everybody on the screen, so you're going to have to speak up if you want to talk. Thanks.
Okay, I have a question, Sandy.
Go ahead, Colleen.
Okay, thank you. Can you please talk about the support services that you have on site?
Oh, next slide. Perfect.
Oh, okay.
Any other questions before we move on to the next slide? But we are getting right into that.
Don't hear anybody, so we can go.
Okay, so the supports that are typically available, I say typically just because they will change from community to community, often depending on the operator, the organization that's running the housing for us, they might offer something different than another organization depending on their kind of mandates. But at the base level that BC Housing provides, so we're providing the studio home for the individual. We're funding a bare minimum of 2 staff on site 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that's just a bare minimum. It's generally more than that. You might find the bare minimum, you might find 2 staff on there in the middle of the night or on the weekend or something. But generally there's a manager on site as well. There's generally a maintenance worker there. There's often, the folks will come to the housing, they'll move in, and they will come with supports that they bring with them, either from Interior Health or maybe other advocacy or social organizations in town that are connected to them. Those people will come and support them where they live as well. The staff on site are there to maintain the security of the building, the cleanliness of the building, respond to any emergent needs from the tenants. They can support them into medication management, reminding them to do that. They can make referrals to outside organizations if they need help doing that, getting connected with anybody. We provide the meals, as we've discussed, as part of the supports, and often organizations, one of the base things they're able to do is to support people in enhancing their life skills. What we mean by that is when people are living homeless, it's obviously extremely difficult, as an understatement, and carrying your life on your back. And when people move into a new home like this and start to find some stability, the staff are there to help them with things like simple cooking or keeping your unit clean, helping with laundry, just to get back into the swing of things that way. I think I've covered everything on there too. Just the connection also with education and employment opportunities and services, the staff can do that as well. But like I said, we have many different operators in the province, and many of them have their own core mandates that, services that they provide in addition to these kind of basic services.
Any questions of Matthew? Okay.
Next slide.
Lisa, can I just get you to take the floor if something comes up for 1 minute?
Just take the next slide.
Yes,
there,
absolutely.
Dana.
Thank you.
Can you see that?
Oh, sorry, I'm looking at mine. Thank you. Who lives in our supportive housing? So our supportive housing is for local residents who are over the age of 19. They are for those who are currently experiencing or may be at risk of homelessness. And like I said before, this housing is for folks who are in need of additional supports in order to maintain their tenancy. Without that level of support, they might get evicted or not be able to find what they need when it comes to housing. On the right here, we have resident selection process. I talked a little bit about this. So we talked about the VAT, that's the vulnerable assessment tool, that's the assessment tool, but the selection process, we call it the coordinated access table. And what that is we will come to community early on before the buildings open and gather together all the relevant stakeholders in the community, anybody who may represent or advocate for a client who is looking for housing. As well as Interior Health and others. That table will attempt to pool a list and assessments for everybody who's looking for housing in the community. And their job is to go through those assessments and to tenant the building appropriately to achieve what we think of as a balanced tenant mix. It's intended to be a transparent process that includes all communities. There's no wait list at this organization, wait list at this organization. An organization that may not know where their client sits on another organization's list, that doesn't happen. BC Housing holds the housing list, the waiting list. And we all work together to go through the list and through the assessments to ensure that those units go to the individuals who absolutely need it the most at that time. And then once that initial tenanting is done, that table will meet generally once a month, depends on the community or how many vacancies come up in the building, but they will meet to continue that process, to continue to gather assessments, gather housing applications, hold that list with BC Housing, and when units come up, they're responsible for making sure that the unit goes to the individual who needs it the most in the community.
Okay, I have a question, Matthew. On the left side where people who apply must be a local resident over the age of 19. So we have young people at the age of 18 that are eliminated from the foster service because they've graduated from high school. How does supportive housing help those students or those young people? They could be out on the street. They're not 19 to qualify for supportive housing. How do you fit into this?
Yeah, good question. We have been tackling this a little bit in Kelowna recently with a new site called McCurdy, where we have a working agreement relationship with CMHA and MCFD. We're working to figure out how we can support that age group, because we know it is a bit of a gap group that falls through the cracks sometimes, and we do often look at people who are 18 but maybe turning 19 within the year. They might get on our list so that we know to keep an eye out for them. And yeah, so that's about what I can say to that, unless Nanette wanted to add anything more.
So Kelowna is about the only area that you've been working in terms of this problem?
That's the area that I've been working in under my catchment. It's also been happening in Vancouver as well, but I'm not aware of this much.
We are, Councillor Dolby, we are working in 2 other communities for a youth-specific supportive housing. And I do think with what we did at McCurdy, if we were to move ahead with supportive housing in Trail, I think we're open for the discussion about youth, and if there's a need and if MCFD is willing, I think we're quite willing to have that conversation. The youth portfolio is one of importance to us as well. So this is typical, and as Matt had said, I think when we come into community, we want to look at what that specific community's needs are. So if you feel, and others are telling us there's a youth component here that we need to address, we would certainly look at that with you.
Okay, thank you.
Sandy, Robert,
Yep, Robert.
Dana, what's the McCurdy one? Is the McCurdy one the supportive housing, or is that just the shelter?
Supportive housing. It is a supportive housing project.
Is
yes.
that the one they put in the portables?
No, McCurdy is actually it's a site built. It was built by a developer, and we purchased the building, our units from him.
That's in Rutland, right?
In Rutland, it was the one that had all the negative opposition. Yes, that's the one. But it was not. It is all independent units, commercial kitchen, just like we're describing here.
Okay.
The only difference with that is that it's a strata. So the Knights of Columbus, who own the original property, they built their own hall, which they own in that building, and we own the unit. So that's really a nuance that's a bit different, but otherwise similar to this. But they are independent units. Yes.
I just wondered because I know I looked at that McCurdy one. Thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions?
I just have a quick question, Sandy.
Go ahead, Colleen.
I'm just wondering if you can tell me, is there a regulated level of service that is provided in the supportive housing development? Is there a set standard of services that they have to provide to these people 24/7? Or does it change with the different people in the program or in the service?
The operators, you mean? Yeah.
So with the supportive housing, the base level of service is 2 24/7 tenant support workers. And then you have a manager, and then you have someone who deals with maintenance, and then you have someone who deals with cooking the meals. So that's sort of the base level. And then of course, we have some providers who want to do more vocational programming. We've got a new project that they're really focused on Indigenous programming. We've got one that has other contracts with Work BC. So they really sort of try and focus on employment readiness or volunteer readiness. So, and then of course, then we've got the health component. And so whatever the needs are in the particular supportive housing and the needs that the tenants have identified, health can come in, whether it's home care or whether it's mental health and substance use clinicians, whatever that might be. So the base level is that 24/7, the 2 24/7, and that's what really sets the supportive housing fund operating dollars apart from maybe our other programs that we have at BC Housing. It's really heavy on the supports, and for a 40 unit building, you're looking at $1 million of subsidy, 80% of which are the staff wages to support that site.
And as far as regulated, Colleen, I think all that is outlined in our operating agreement with the operator who runs the building for us.
Okay, thank you.
I've got a question, Matthew. Some of these are a bit sensitive, but they're real. With respect to the residents of the supportive housing, I'm assuming that BC Housing or the society or the nonprofit that's operating it has the right to evict someone who becomes disruptive due to drugs or is unmanageable and a disruption to the other residents. I'm assuming the Tenancy Act doesn't apply in this regard.
Well, we do like to reflect the Tenancy Act. You know, we look at these as apartments and they come with supports. We do believe in tenant rights, and, you know, people have a right to privacy and a right to quiet enjoyment and all the things that all of us enjoy under the Tenancy Act as well. So we do, you know, model our agreements on that. The program agreement is a little different in that it outlines additional programs, you could call, or supports that the operator will bring with when they, you know, when they take over the operation and the tenants agree to sign in.
Right.
But yeah, like we aren't trying to skirt the tenancy agreement here. We want people to be successful in their tenancies, and that's why we put so much in on the support side to help them be successful.
Are there any that are 100% private sector owned and operated, providing services or contracting out to BC Housing?
Supportive housing? No.
Okay.
Not that I'm aware of. We won't say an absolute no, Councillor Santori, because we never know, but not that we're aware of.
Okay.
But certainly, just on that comment, just certainly the rent supplements that we have, we do partner with the private market landlord, and we do have our nonprofits going in there and providing service in apartment buildings all throughout the province. And so
Okay.
that doesn't go exactly where your question was, but it just gives you a sense of the partnerships involved.
The only reason I raised the question, you know, some people have asked, you know, would government, I guess, guarantee a private sector, if you person or company that wanted to build, say, 30 units, would they be guaranteed or assured by BC Housing that that facility would be used and subsidized by BC Housing as if it was their own?
It's an interesting question, Councillor Santori, because for supportive housing and our women fleeing domestic violence programs, the funding we have for that requires us to own it.
Oh,
And
okay.
so we are already the owners. Even in this case, we don't even provide the funding to the nonprofits to be an owner. What we do with our nonprofit operators is that we have them sign the contracts to operate, you know, through an operator agreement to operate the building.
Right.
And those are, and if everything's going great, they're renewable. But if, say, operations, you know, change of staff, something happens and operations start to go downhill,
Right.
we have the opportunity to bring a different operator in. And that's another way for us to ensure a quality of support. So if things start to go wrong, and sometimes they do, we can then step in and get a different operator to come in and run the project. So we actually do retain ownership of these projects because of the significant both capital and operational investment that's required for them.
Okay, so I think that even answers Councillor Jones's in terms of level of care, that there are minimum requirements, and if not met by the nonprofit, you reserve the right to change the operator or the provider, right?
Yes, yeah. If things are not going right and it's not
Right.
operating correctly, we have that right to bring another operator in.
Okay, thank you.
So I just want to ask on that in terms of the operator, do you do unannounced spot checks, or how does that get managed by the government?
So Matt, I'll let you comment on your approach, but certainly with our providers, we really have strong working relationships where we provide support and guidance around best practice and how to actually deliver the support services that were required. So, and we don't do unannounced spot checks, but certainly we're pre-COVID. Matt will tell you that his office was his vehicle, and he would be meeting with the providers on a very regular basis. We have a formal operational review where we look at formally the requirements and how they're doing. And then, of course, every year we have a financial review where we're looking at the amount of subsidy that we provided and their audited financial statements and making sure that the funds are allocated appropriately.
Yeah, and part of the joy of my job, I suppose, is that I've worked in nonprofits, supportive housing and shelters for 20 years in Vancouver before I moved out here to work with BC Housing. And so being able to travel, like Nanette said, and spend time in the buildings and meeting with the operators and seeing how they operate, learning from them and getting a chance to impart some of my knowledge or mentor them a little bit on occasion is great. And that's part of our just regular ongoing relationship rather than dropping in on them unannounced.
So when you stop at the different supportive housing units, do you ever talk to the residents as well?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
To get their feedback?
Yes, for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions on this? Next slide, if there is one.
There is. I'll go through this one a bit quickly on site selection. I think we've talked about this before. So again, with site selection for supportive housing, we are looking to be close to community services. We don't have people that are driving cars or anything. Usually it's walking or biking. We want, if possible, accessibility transit, both for the residents and for potential staff. And again, that proximity to space areas where staff can easily get to the projects. The adequate lot shape and size is, of course, important. We typically look to do a modular form of construction because of expediency, and sometimes we will site build. The land use policies, again, working with our local government partners on that site selection and ensuring we consider this multifamily housing, 2, 3, 4, 5 stories buildings, and making sure we're adhering to policies or doing appropriate rezonings or variance approvals that are required. And then also always, is there properties available for purchase that we have to look at? So sometimes we can't get all of these. We have to take the best opportunity provided to us, but these are typical that we're looking for. And this is about access to the services. As Nanette and Matt had said, we bring services into the building, but residents will already have possibly social workers or other services in community that they're going out for. Maybe they're going to an AA meeting, or maybe they're going to some other counseling or mental health services somewhere else. So wanting to be close so that they can get to them. They don't have a reason to say, I couldn't get there today, too long of a walk or something. We want to make sure we're making it as achievable as possible for them.
Okay. Any questions on site selection criteria? Okay.
So this next slide is always of interest, I think, to municipalities, because everyone's goal, of course, is to successfully integrate these sites into neighborhoods and into communities. And so we have a number of approaches that we take collectively that help support that successful integration. The first is what we've talked about before, is the staffing model. Having staff around 24/7 really helps to ensure that the site is managed properly. Resident selection, what Matt talked about, where we have a coordinated process and we really we assess the individuals. We make sure that the people that know the individuals are speaking at our coordinated access tables. So we have a really fulsome understanding of the individuals moving in, and that the building is balanced. We know we can't have 40 high support needs individuals and be able to manage that housing successfully. So we have a balanced resident mix, I'll call it. And that really helps support stability for the housing. Property maintenance. We're BC Housing, so we're in the business of maintaining our properties properly and ensuring that the buildings are considered a really great feature in the neighborhood. Some of our supportive housing are some of the nicest buildings in the area. And Councillor Santori talked about, no, maybe it wasn't. It was someone mentioned McCurdy. It's not on my screen anymore, but McCurdy. Thank you. I can't see him on my screen. McCurdy is it's just beautiful, and it's just a beautiful feature in Rutland, and so we want to ensure that our providers are maintaining the property properly, and they go out and do that both interior and in the exterior and in the neighborhood. Just a comment on design features. Certainly, it looks like a picture of a camera, but yes, we have all of the cameras installed. We make sure the fencing's appropriate. We make sure that there's one point of access, so there is a real control about who's accessing the site. Good lighting, that's really important feature as well. Program agreements, again, Matt talked about that, but that's an important opportunity to really ensure that tenants and the land and the nonprofits are aware of what their obligations are within the housing, and make sure there's some responsibility attached to, paying rent and making sure their suites are good and they have a great community. The last thing, the last approach I think we take in all of our supportive housing, and it's worked out really well in our region and across the province really, is around setting up a community advisory committee. And so that committee is really, it starts prior to the building opening. We make sure that we have the stakeholders that are really interested in the property, like Interior Health, BC Housing, usually someone from the city, usually someone from bylaw or CMP, neighbors, businesses. Usually it's 10 or 12 people, school board, depending on where we are in proximity to a school. And we talk about how we successfully integrate these projects into community. And it's a way to problem solve issues that come up, a way for our stakeholders to really feel that they have a direct line to the operator and make sure we can problem solve as we go along. Our experience has been, and Matt can attest to this, is now we are at sites that were very divisive in community. They were often litigious, actually. And in that one that I'm thinking of, the focus of that particular community advisory committee is around the strong neighborhoods and wanting to build community gardens that everyone can access, including the residents that live at that supportive housing site. So it's taken a full, it's beautiful to see that that's actually what we're talking about, and not about, well, I'm scared to go up, down my road because of who you're housing in the building, which was what was previously talked about. So that's how we successfully integrate into neighborhoods. Any site in Trail wouldn't be any different. This was the approach that we would take, and we found it's been very successful.
Look to the community advisory committee. We talked about.
Okay, yeah, we talked about this. It's I don't think I need to spend any more time unless someone has questions about who would be involved or the purpose.
And I think, Councillor Dobie, this hopefully answers a bit of your question about the spot checks or the checking in. Even though we're not local necessarily, or Matt's around, we have this entire advisory committee made up of people in the neighborhood that would be able to speak to or let us know if things weren't running properly in the project.
Yeah, I can see that. Thank you.
Yep. And then the next slide, Dana, is again just I think it's just really to highlight how important BC Housing takes the issue of being a good neighbor and ensuring that the people that go to live in the neighborhood feel like they're going to be welcomed into the neighborhood, but also the neighbors, surrounding businesses, whoever's a neighbor of this site feels that they have an opportunity to either phone. So there's always a designated 24/7 phone line that they can call. We usually also give them the name of the actual team lead there so that they have a direct line and they know who to call. We also have what's called clean teams, and this has worked out really well when you have people with lived experience. So they actually live in the supportive housing, and they want to give something back, but just not sure how. This is kind of sometimes the linkage into community where they go around and clean up the neighborhood. And we usually have them in high vis vests so that people know that this is their neighbor who's living in this site and it wants to clean up and make sure that they're doing what they can in the neighborhood. It's usually staff supported as well. And then of course the designated community advisory committee. And we always have neighbors on those committees just because that's what the community advisory committee is all about.
Any questions?
And I think that's the end of our presentation. So
Awesome. Well, thank you, Dana, Nanette, and Matthew. Are there any final questions or comments or concerns that council wants to ask or share with the BC Housing reps? Robert? You're muted, Robert. You're muted, Robert.
I'd just like to get that sent out to me, the actual presentation, if you don't mind.
I shared it with Michelle today. She can share that with all of you.
That's great. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming.
Thanks again, Dana, Nanette, and Matthew, and hopefully BC Housing will make a decision quickly on our community and assist us in meeting those housing needs expeditiously, if I may.
Excellent. We'll be in touch for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next item 2, operational reports. Welcome, Tricia. And Tricia's here tonight to give us the Parks and Rec Department report.
Good
Welcome, Trish.
afternoon, good evening.
Hi.
Maybe I'll just do a bit of a time check. How much time do I have? And I'll tailor my discussion accordingly.
Time's up.
Oh, I know you want to hear from me for hours and hours.
We did run just a little bit long with BC Housing. If you could stick to about 15 minutes, Tricia, that would be appreciated.
I can do that. Thank you very much. So you have my report in front of you. I will also show you a few photos towards the end to kind of better capture some of the things I'm going to talk about. I'm going to skim this, and if you have any particular questions, certainly feel free to jump in. So I've aimed to focus on the last kind of 2 months and kind of the upcoming 2 months. I found that a little bit challenging to do, in part because I feel like I haven't chatted about the department in this way for quite some time. So I did sort of add some other things in just for your information. So COVID specifics, of course, that's our main challenge at this moment in time. But I'll focus on what we've done right now, which is to gear up for the next season, which of course is park season and or people being outdoors, which is very helpful during COVID. So we've updated all of our safety plans for any spaces that would have a change in services or that have reopened for this season. So that would of course include all of our outdoor spaces. And then we have to continually update our safety plans as the health orders change. So the most recent one that impacted us most significantly was in relation to the mask order for fitness. So for those that are not individual fitness goers, so those would be people that are coming to our gym, and you may not know this, you now are required to wear a mask while exercising in this space. So that I have to say, as much as I envision this to be a bit of a nightmare to implement, I got to hand it to the community for embracing this change along with all the others over this past year and a bit. It's not comfortable wearing a mask, exercising indoors, so people have had to make some different choices, and we've aimed to support them in whatever way we can. And we also have had to reduce our occupancy slightly because the physical distancing requirement for fitness changed in these past few months. You may have also noticed that all of our signage outdoors was updated. So we changed the color scheme a little bit, tried to make, the barrage of signs that we all see as we go about our day-to-day lives these days. We tried to make them a little bit interesting, or maybe a point of interest that people would again read them and be reminded as to what the expectations are related to various spaces. And we continue to have a variety of meetings throughout the province to try to support the sport, recreation, and culture services. It's a very highly impacted area due to COVID-19. And I think you heard it in the auditor's report as well, where they referenced that our services just are nowhere close to what they would have been, a year and a half ago. So on the personnel front, we have been able to hire some full-time staff over the last little while. We have a new full-time head guard in place. We have a new RFA full-time staff person at the arena, and as well as there's a new full-time collections coordinator at the Riverfront Center. We have a lifeguard job posting out. That one I want to spend a little bit of time chatting about, and I'm going to come back to. But we've also filled cashier positions in the last little while. And I'll come back to the lifeguard one. So we've had a job posting out for the lifeguard position probably since January, and with very, very few applicants applying. And it's a bit of a canary in the coal mine scene where we've now gone through a year where very few courses have been able to be offered that support the certification requirements for people to become a lifeguard. And so our numbers of staff throughout the province are extremely low when it comes to who can fill lifeguarding positions. So it's an issue that the Life Saving Society, the Red Cross who does swimming lessons, and the aquatic teams throughout the province are working on. But I would say it is the most fragile I have ever seen the aquatic service, due to just how few people there are that are actually certified to be able to offer that program, or be able to actually act as a lifeguard and offer the service. So we're holding our own right now. But as I talk a little bit more about the hours of operation, I think that will speak to maybe why we're able to hold our own. But I just want to flag that for everybody, that it's an area of concern for me coming into the next several months. And I would say in particular in September, when we would normally see a transition of a fair number of our staff move on to post-secondary education. We had the luxury of having some stay this past year or not go back to school because they were able to do their schooling from home or returned home, and then were looking for employment because they were home trying to go to post-secondary school. So I just don't quite know what that's going to look like in the coming months. So a couple of other things that I just wanted to touch on. So we did apply for 2 grants this past winter. So one was the SIRIP grant, which was to support the old library renovation project at the Trail Memorial Center. So both of the main funding for that was already supported through the capital plan, but the goal with the grant was to offset some of those costs. So we have not heard of the outcome of that application as of yet. As well as we also applied for a grant through the Healthy Communities initiative to support some playground replacement work up at Haley Park. There is ongoing work going on with the 2026 Winter Games bid. So myself, a representative from the city of Rosslyn, and Wayne Naka presented to the school board a couple of weeks ago to speak to them and get their required resolutions to support our bid package. So we're hoping to hear from them in the coming weeks. We were able to get all of the work done to support the Butler Park challenges we've had over these past few months. So there's a host of things that we've done, but maybe to highlight a few of them is the sod work that Chris McIsaac's department has been working on is now complete, which will now start to allow baseball users to use the infield portion of Butler Park, the batting cages, and a few other kind of amenities, just not the actual outfield to play. The batting tunnel has arrived, and you may have seen it if you drove by the park recently. It was getting set up last week, so that is expected to be put in operation as the group starts to use the infield space. Their storage room has been completed, or sorry, it's almost complete. The physical structure is there, but that is all set to go. All their signage is ready to go for Tom Street and Columbia Avenue for when baseball activities are able to be permitted. And we were able to sort out I'm calling it an access agreement with the Butler Park users that is ready to go as soon as all the construction workers have officially demobilized from Butler Park. So it's been a lot of work over the last little while, but lots of great energy and lots of support from all of the baseball users, and certainly between the Parks and Recreation and Public Works departments. We were able to secure a rebate from Fortis for some of the energy conservation work going on at the Trail Memorial Center in the amount of just over $21,000. So that was kudos to Robert Baker for following through and sorting out that rebate request. And this week, the Greater Trail Kids Sport Group, which both Councillor Gattafoni Robinson and I sit on, we are hosting a session, kind of like this, with the sport users in the region to try to figure out if there's ways that our little group of kids sport can further help to support all the minor sport activities in our region in a successful recovery of their activities. And of course, kids sport itself has a specific mandate, but we also have people and energy around the table to figure out what we can do to support those operations. It's been a very tough year for all minor sport operations, and in particular, the volunteers that work so hard to put on those activities. So hopefully we'll continue to be able to work with them and sort some things out with them. Any questions about the first part?
Trish, it's Eleanor. Can you give us an update on the pickleball court?
Oh, yes. Can you hold that thought?
Sure.
It's coming. Perfect. On the operations side, so Lisa Maneg, our recreation coordinator, was able to secure 4 summer student grants this summer, so to the tune of almost $13,000. So that'll be great to help offset the cost to run those programs, especially when we have so few people we can have in them due to occupancy requirements. We had a family day grant. We actually got 2 of them to support some free programming on the family day weekend. And some recreation programming highlights would include the successful operating of the spring break camp. If you can envision that was a year ago, that those were the first services actually impacted by COVID-19. And so it was a full year later that we were circling back and trying to remember what we did to offer those programs indoors. With the Butler Park pickleball and tennis courts under construction, we were able to put some temporary nets that users can set up at the Lower Sunningdale Sport Court in the play box. So those are available, and I understand are being actively used by people. So it's nice to see people being drawn to that court and to learn what services are over there for them to participate in, as well as our own here. Unfortunately, fitness classes got impacted shortly after the new year. We literally could not offer any fitness classes to adults as of January. So we can still do individual fitness. You can come to the fitness center, but we couldn't bring people together for the purpose of fitness still to this day. So we're holding out hope that that will change in the near future. We could do it outdoors, which we are exploring, but it's not quite as straightforward as one might think. And there's a couple of grants that we're also applying for to support the purchase of equipment for the play boxes. Those play boxes were not in operation last year. And so we're still toying with the idea of whether that is a good thing to do or not. So, but we want to have the equipment ready just in case we can proceed with that. But right now they're not operational other than for the pickleball nets at the Lower Sunningdale Court. So on the aquatic side, I just want to draw your attention maybe to the chart. So the whole purpose of the chart, and I'll let you read it in detail as you wish, but was more to show what has changed over the course of when the pool and the fitness center reopened. I probably should have also included August, because there was no pool operation in August, but there was fitness center hours. And what I wanted to sort of paint a picture of is to how we've reviewed, analyzed, and implemented increases in service throughout the last 8 months to try to meet both the public demand, analyze what was working and what wasn't, and be able to adjust our service offerings to best try to meet the needs of the community. And so you can see that just on the pool side, we've gone from 18.5 hours a week back in September to now we're up to 47 hours a week of service provision. So that's significant for us. And of course, it's not quite the same, even though we're paying staff slightly more than that, because we have to create these buffer zones in between user groups, to uses, so that we don't have them overlap each other. So paid staff time is slightly more than that, but the hours of service are accurate to that number. And we've also, as the pool hours have slightly changed, then we've been able to adjust the fitness center hours because we have staff in the building. But I just also, in the very first bullet point under item C, I just give reference to what the hours of service used to be before COVID, so that you can actually appreciate the difference that the community is feeling from the degree of difference that we have. So, to give you an example, it's 71.25 hours of fitness center time compared to 94 hours a week pre-COVID. And for the pool, it was 82 hours a week. We're at 47. So that's pretty standard across the province, from a pool operation being at about the 50% mark. So I won't go into all of the details related to the pool side. I think just the one thing, if you haven't been somebody that's been in this facility, the major change is that you just don't see multiple services happening at once. So you don't see lane swim happening with public swim happening with lessons. It's one or the other at any kind of given time. So of course, there's no events going on, so I don't have anything to report there. I threw in some highlights for the Riverfront Center that I thought might be of interest to people. So that committee, our operations committee, has resumed. We meet at least once a month, if not every 2 weeks, pending kind of what the discussions are or what people need at any time. We did have multiple staff participate in the training session that was put on by the Kootenay Library Foundation or Federation, and it was excellent. It was a really well done presentation on how to better serve and support the homeless population. So it was really great. And I know that Sam and Sarah are working on how to implement some of those learnings from that session. And our big thing, which was tabled at the end of in January-ish of last year, due to some changes that were going on at the Riverfront Center, is to actually work on the development of a shared patron experience vision for that space to, again, further ground both stakeholders in what they're offering and what they want people to feel and experience when they come into that building. And so Sam and Sarah, of course, now a year and a bit through COVID, are now energized in trying to do something a little different than just talk about COVID. So we'll see where that can take us in the coming months. So on the maintenance side, and this is Councillor Gattafoni, I'll talk a little bit about those projects you're talking about, but lots and lots of work is going on in the background in facilities. Of course, there's not nearly as many services going on to the public, but we're sure trying to make sure buildings are ready to go and are exciting for people to come back to. So there's the ice will have just been removed from the arena last Friday, so April 30th. So now they're going to kick into kind of the arena repairs and board work and all the stuff at the arena. We're starting to do some tile work at the pool because, again, we don't have as many people here. There's some work that we can move out of shutdown and into other times of the year just to help take the load off of what goes on in that month, knowing that people are going to be really taxed this year during that month leading into the fall. And we are hoping to have some diving board repairs completed. The diving boards have been shut down for the last several months, and those parts have finally arrived. And so we're hoping to see those be put to use and actually put the diving boards back together here very shortly. So I'm going to not talk about all the details about the capital project plan and shift to just a bit of a presentation of some pictures that I thought might be more interesting than listening to me talk. So for those that have not been in the arena building in a while, this is, if you can envision, during a Smoke Eaters game, they would often have their tent set up where that bench is, and they would be selling merchandise. So that is the main kind of entry lobby as you've come up into the building. So those windows used to exist in the old library space, and they have been reinstated to daylight that part of the building. Isn't that cool?
Mm-hmm. Looks good.
Well, just wait, there's more. You'll be so excited to come in this building. So so this is now looking back to what would be the main doors that would come into the old library space. So you can see one of the RFA staff looking like I think they're painting or touching up the window applications, and those big double doors that are in front of the little ladder that's there. So those would be new, but that space would be where the old kind of kitchenette sort of staff room was behind the main counter. So that whole, and you'll see another picture of that in a second. So there's now multiple access points into this, what's a very large storage space in that room, so that we can better support fitness programming and other activities in this room. So the ceiling is what I've tried to show in this picture. So that whole white wall in the back used to be the kitchenette space that's now been completely closed in as a large storage room. And all of the ceiling tile that used to exist below the concrete was removed. All the concrete was cleaned and new lighting was installed in the space. It's neat, eh? I love that picture.
Looks good.
So here's another picture, again, kind of if you're standing at the corner, kind of like your back is almost to the windows that would look outside the building. This is now just giving you a broad picture of what the space looked like. This picture was taken probably, I'm going to say at least a month ago. So it could even look more different than it does now. So moving out into another space in the arena, and sorry, this picture is a bit pixelated, but on the north side of the upper concourse, windows have been reinstated to the main arena bowl. So those windows, if you kept walking down there, you
They
would
were
run
covered
into the
before.
refinery. That's correct. They were covered with wood before.
Yeah,
So if you kept walking straight down that hallway, you would end up at the refinery corner.
yeah.
Tricia, do you know the history behind why it was boarded in the first place?
I don't know if I do. Do you have something to
Yeah,
share?
well, when they used to play afternoon games, this is back in junior and some of the seniors and midget games, the sun was going down onto the ice surface and blinding people, or they couldn't see if the sun was
Absolutely.
shining through there. They did it there, and they also did it down at the, I guess it'd be the south end or west end towards the bridge.
That's right. So that's exactly why those windows have not been put back in. So these
Okay.
ones are on the north side, so
Yeah,
that we don't have
they
that.
should be
that
okay
issue.
there. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Okay.
there's a section here, and then there's another section a little bit further back towards the
Chip
Spud
stand?
Shack. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Mhm.
So this is the
Oh,
Good, they're
McIntyre.
back.
Oh,
the
look at
McIntyre.
that.
Doesn't that look wonderful? So that's a
Yeah.
commemorative plaque to the kids rink that was relocated from elsewhere in the building to better, celebrate the kids rink in its, especially when you can see it now. So there's three very large windows that basically occupy the entire wall that would look down to the kids rink from the McIntyre room. So you can envision days when we can have events again and have things like, anything, socials, think about minor hockey tournaments where now you can actually physically see into different spaces and the different uses the building will be able to support or certainly have people engage with the activities on the ice. So how we use that, of course, now will both be up to how public decides to want to request to use it, but also now how we will use it for our services as well is still up in the air at this point.
Nice.
And then one more space. So this is, sorry, it's kind of two pictures. I don't know if that's super clear on your side, but these are the windows now that go from the red floor room
Oh, yeah.
to the kids rink as well. So
Mhm.
this wall would be literally perpendicular to the wall from the McIntyre room. So you actually have two vantage points to the kids rink ice from rooms elsewhere in the building.
Oh, gosh.
Oh, it looks great, hey?
Oh,
That's
gorgeous.
great.
Yeah.
And so Councillor
There's
Gattafoni, you're
pickleball.
asking about pickleball. So these guys have been actively on site now for about the last 12 days. And I swear they're working 12 plus hours a day because every time I leave at the end of the day, they're still here and they're definitely here before I come to work every day. So this is being prepped now for paving to occur. I believe Wednesday this week is the plan. So all of the fence poles are now in and they're just leveling the ground, getting ready for that work. This is the sidewalk. I don't know if you can see my mouse, but there's a sidewalk here and that runs parallel to the parking lot. And so this area, we ripped out a whole bunch of those kind of short evergreen shrubs. And this will now become the new access point for pickleball directly to the pickleball courts. So these two posts that are close together will become the entry gate to the pickleball side of the courts. And this will also now be, if you've ever watched the culture of pickleball, they all like to congregate together and sit and wait to come on and off the court. And so this was a big source of frustration for tennis because tennis, they were occupying the tennis court in order to do that. So we've actually now are trying to give them a space of their own where they can enjoy being able to see the full court and then also be able to access the court easily and stay safe from not being hit or run into by players on the court. That's just another picture, just some of the shrubs so that you can kind of see how it's kind of opened up this area. It looks really great. If you get a chance to drive by, you'll appreciate it. And
That's great.
Yeah, my last pieces of my presentation were just giving you a bit of the budget highlights. Again, I'll divert back to the audit report. Our ability to offer services are nowhere close to what we are used to. And so we're going to be very challenged budget-wise to even meet our budget targets unless restrictions start to shift. So we're regularly watching that and certainly working to offer whatever we can as safely as possible to the community, because there was ever a time to be told how much people value what the Parks and Recreation Service does. It has been in this past year. People are just so appreciative for anything that we can do and so happy when things open up back to being able to have them do what they love to do. So with that, I will turn it over to questions.
Lisa?
I just want to say, Tricia, that I had some nice feedback from your department. I have a friend who likes walking in Gyro, and I think most of us will know who she is. She's 99 and quite a tiny, lovely lady. And she was so thankful that the washroom doors became accessible because she often had to ask for help to open the washroom doors. So just kudos to you for that. And it's a nice success story there.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Trish.
Thanks, Trish.
Cheryl, go ahead.
Trish, I just wanted to ask, what is the flooring in the old library? Is that lino or tile or what?
It's a lino. If my grant comes through, my hope is to rip that floor out and put down something different that's better. Well, one that's just new. It's a bit beat up, even though they've tried to clean it and do what they can. But the goal is to ultimately replace that.
With carpet?
No, definitely not carpet. It'll be more like a
Good.
multi-purpose type surface that could be used for fitness, could be used for meetings, could be used for birthday parties, could be used for any other thing in between.
Most of them have been putting in that rubberized flooring now. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I probably drive past your area more than anybody, and I just cannot believe how quickly that group at the pickleball courts have been working. Every time I go by, like you say, they're there 7 days a week, I think.
Oh no, it's incredible with like, and there, I don't know, I think I counted 10 of them out there today. And they're, it's Sierra Landscaping that's got the contract for that. And that's the same company that's done lots of work in the city, but more recently also did the landscaping at the skate park. And I can't say enough good things about them.
So just wanted to ask you, going towards the baseball park, when you're getting closer to that, at that end of the courts, they had a huge trench dug down. What was that for? Is that for drainage?
Or are you thinking like it was running parallel to that little service road between the tennis courts and Butler Park?
Yeah.
So they had to dig that down to build a new concrete retaining wall to support the net or the fence posts.
Okay. All right.
It had all become compromised and undermined.
I thought there was some good explanation. Thank you.
Any other questions of Trish?
Nope.
If
Thank you,
not,
Trish.
Thanks very much, Trish.
Thanks, Trish.
Thanks,
Thank
Trish.
you.
Okay, now off to Public Works and the request for purchase of the combination sewer cleaning truck. Chris is going to be with us today.
No, he isn't. We thought this was straightforward, so I'll give you just a brief summary if you wish. The purchasing and mechanical superintendent did go out to quotes for the capital budget purchase that has been authorized by council this year. You've included just over $500,000 in the capital plan for the replacement of the city's Vactor. We are looking for council's approval for the purchase of Vactor from Weimar Equipment in the amount of $377,067 exclusive of taxes. Weimar was the low bidder when considering the trade-in value that we will receive on our existing piece of equipment that has reached the end of its useful life, and we're seeing rising repair costs. And with this purchase, we will be looking at a unit that has added capacity and would meet with the necessary gross vehicle weight rating to manage the majority of the city's operations. So looking at a unit with a tandem axle chassis so that it can be legally driven while fully loaded. And the recommendation before you is that council approve the purchase of a Vactor 2100i combination sewer cleaning truck from Weimar Equipment in the amount of $377 and $67 exclusive of taxes.
So moved.
I'll second.
Councillor Kashoni, seconded by Mayor Payson. Any questions of Michelle?
Yep.
Not hearing any. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
No opposition. The motion is carried. Now, I got confused earlier. We've already made this motion, haven't we?
No.
The motion earlier was receipt of the financial statements.
Oh, okay.
I'll move this one.
So the motion from Councillor Kashoni is to approve the statements and schedules in
The
the
Sophie.
state financial up to the year ending December 31st, moved by Councillor Kashoni. Do we have a seconder?
I can second.
Mayor Payson. Any questions?
No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried.
That's
See
it.
you all at 6 o'clock.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Well,